Warhammer 40k is a game that I always wanted to get into, but never had the spare money to do so. Not that my current hobbies aren't cheap. Why the fuck is Megatron $300? Like, really? So when Space Marine came out, I found myself wanting to pick it up day one, possibly seeing it as a way into a universe that I was missing out on because I couldn't afford armies and miniatures. But I found myself distracted by Gears of War 3 at the time. For some reason I completely forgot about the game. So when I saw it in a recent Steam sale, I thought maybe I should finally try it out. As always, let's start with the gameplay. Space Marine is a third-person shooter that, unlike similar games of its time, went without a cover system. Most likely because it would be out of character to see the genetically engineered religious fanatics that are the Space Marines we've seen covering behind chest-high walls. The game also promptly features melee combat that goes beyond the typical instant-kill pistol whip of most shooters, which is expected because it is an adaptation of 40k, and one of the most iconic weapons of the Space Marines arsenal is the chainsword after all. However, here your time spent with the chainsword is somewhat limited, as you'll be quickly dropping it in favor of the more effective power axe, which is essentially just a stat boost. At first there appears to be a lot of enemy variation, but you will shortly realize that each enemy follows the standard tropes, such as the melee guy that charges at you, the normal soldier, the sniper, and the guy that spawns on other enemies. There's also weak, normal, and bullet sponge variations of most enemy types, which is again, is fairly typical. However, there is a lot of variation with the appearance of the enemies, with each enemy type looking very distinct and unique, and the two factions that are featured besides your allies are very different from each other as well. The composition of each enemy type is changed up for the two factions as well. When fighting the orcs, they're more melee than ranged enemies, while fighting the forces of chaos, they'll be more ranged than melee. Another thing that differentiates this game from other games of its kind is how it deals with health. Similar to Halo, you have a regenerating shield and a health bar under it. When you take damage to your health, it does not regenerate and there are no health packs. To recover your health, you have to either execute a stunned enemy, each enemy type having unique and brutal executions similar to the aforementioned Gears of War, or use Fury. Fury is a meter that builds up as you take and deal out damage, and temporarily gives you regenerating health, but it also gives you boosted melee damage and bullet time when using ranged weapons. Your character gets upgrades as the game progresses. These upgrades are pickups that aren't hidden at all, and they're just on the beaten path. And you get no choice as to what you get. Although you can tell the devs had a lot of fun writing the text boxes that explain what each upgrade is. The level design is confident, although like the enemies, it follows multiple tropes of the genre, such as sections where you face waves of enemies waiting for a door, and turret sections. However, the segments where you use the Assault Marine jump pack work well to break up the pace of the levels and prevent the game from getting monotonous. Another stereotypical feature that the game has is audio logs hidden throughout the levels that give you a little bit of backstory, but they really aren't worth your time, and a good chunk of them are easier to find than a copy of Mario Duck Hunt. Also, the voice acting in them, it's just terrible.
Workers, assemble.
Caleb, there you are. The Shiring brothers are saying we're under attack.
Brothers are idiots, Lilith.
They saw rocks in the sky.
Xenos, here. Damned unlike it.
The boss fights in the game leave a lot to be desired. There's a grand total of 2 bosses in the game. The first being the Orc War boss, a bullet sponge that telegraphs all of his attacks a good 5 seconds before he attacks, and constantly spawns in waves of enemies. The second and final boss is the Chaos Lord Nemeroth, the whole fight being just 4 waves of enemies in a small arena, followed by a QTE. You don't actually fight the main antagonist of the game, you just press E or V whenever the game tells you to. Seeing as how I already spoiled the final boss, and that one of the major twists is spoiled by the Steam trading cards, I might as well spoil the rest of the plot. Not that you'll be missing much. For the most part, it's just a chase after a power source created by an Inquisitor that's powerful enough to destroy a planet, and may as well be called MacGuffin. Also, plot-wise, the orcs who you fight for more than half the game take a backseat to the Chaos Lord Nemeroth, who's trying to use the power source to transform himself into a demon prince. Twice in the game you are betrayed by your allies, and neither time did it have any impact on me. There's almost no character development throughout the whole game, and as a result, you don't care about the characters or about what happens to them. The voice acting for the main game is alright, and it does its job. However, as already mentioned, the voice acting for some of the audio logs is just downright terrible, to the point where finding the audio logs is either going to be a disappointment for you, or to result in you having a laugh at the voice acting. Either way, it takes you out of the experience. I would talk about the multiplayer, but unfortunately, unlike War for Cybertron, the menu isn't lying to you when it says that no one is playing. And even if you manage to find some players, there's a chance that you wouldn't be able to play with them because of the paid maps. In conclusion, Space Marine is not a bad game. In fact, it's the definition of average. And that's why it's been almost completely forgotten, and the multiplayer is completely dead. If you see it on sale and you like third-person shooters, or you're just a fan of 40k, it's definitely worth the $6 that I paid, but it's nowhere near worth the full price of $32.99. Just know what you're getting into. I just want to add a little side note that isn't really about the game, but I feel that it's still relevant. I don't know what it was, but something about playing through this game made me finally bite the bullet and try to get into 40k. And so far I've been enjoying painting up some Dark Angels.